Alright, so today we're starting a new sermon series called Verse by Verse. Since the beginning of the year, we have been doing topical studies. We have been looking at questions like, who is God? Who am I? Then we spent the last few months talking about all kinds of relationships. Family relationships, marriage, friendship, parenting, all these things. And so we have been doing the kind of Bible study where we pick a topic, and then we jump all over the Bible from Genesis to Revelations, and then find verses that say something about the topic we're in. Now, that's not bad, but we did realize that we cannot only do that. And so we decided that for the next few months, weeks and months, we're going to do something different. Because we're going to study different passages, verse by verse. Now, I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but I just want to make sure that we don't fall in one extreme. We only do one or only do the other, but we get it more into balance. So over the next few weeks, we will study a couple of stories about Jesus. We will look at a few passages from the Old Testament, probably a couple of Psalms, some of the historic stories from the Bible, maybe a prophecy or two from the Old Testament. And then we'll also look into the New Testament. We'll look into some of the epistles, maybe an end-time prophecy, and so on. Now the goal is this. It is so easy to simply read the Bible for the sake of reading it. Isn't it? We are on Bible reading plans. I myself am on a Bible reading plan where I want to read through the whole Bible from January 1st to December 31st. And so often we just read the Bible for the sake of reading it. And then we kind of, at the end of the day, we're just like, okay, I need to read these 3 chapters. We quickly read them just so that we can, in our app, we can tick that box saying, I have read it. Now, that's not bad, but I think we sometimes also need to do something else. Sometimes we need to really go deep on a single verse, on very few verses, on a very short story. And that's what we want to do over the next few weeks and months. That we all receive new tools to read the Bible, verse by verse. We'll do this here at our Sunday services, but we will also do it at our small groups in between the services, where we will take either the same passage or a similar passage, and we study it really verse by verse, going through the text very, very slowly. Now, just to be clear, not every Bible passage is suitable for reading like this. For example, what are the first few verses in the book of Chronicles? It's a list of names. Now, maybe some scholars and some theologians get a lot out of that. I have to admit, I don't. So that's not a passage where I suggest that we read verse by verse. Sometimes we also have longer passages that we need to look at in the whole context. And we cannot just pick out this verse and that verse, but we really need to see what the whole passage is saying so that we really understand it. Now, I'm not saying that this way of reading the Bible verse by verse is the only way, but I am saying that it is a very important way. And I think we should all be equipped to read the Bible like this and use these tools and really read the Bible verse by verse when it is appropriate. It's a very important way of reading it. So let's get started with the passage for today, which comes from Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42, just 5 verses. Now it happened, as they went, that he, referring to Jesus, that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. And Jesus answered and said to her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things. But one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her. Just a short passage, right? And it's so easy to just read it and think like, okay, so Mary sits at Jesus' feet, Martha is serving a lot, Jesus tells her that this is not good, and then we kind of move on. But let's see what is really there and how it applies to us. Now, quick background. Mary and Martha were sisters. They also had a brother named Lazarus, who does not appear in this story, but in other stories in the New Testament. So the three of them were siblings, and they were close friends with Jesus. Jesus visited them several times throughout the New Testament. The 3 or 4 of them spent time together. So this wasn't just a random meeting. This was a meeting of close friends getting together. So let's take this passage apart, verse by verse. Here we go. Now it happened as they went that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. What can we learn from here? I think a very important detail that we should not overlook, especially as the story continues. Martha is the one who invited Jesus, not Mary. This becomes important because when we think about why did Mary behave like this, why did Martha say that, and so on, we should always remember Martha initiated the whole thing. We don't know exactly what it means that she welcomed him to her house. Maybe she sent an invitation. Maybe this was prearranged a week before and she said, Jesus, please next week come to my home. Maybe he was just walking through the village and she saw him and she just spontaneously said, hey, I want to invite you. We don't know the details, but the fact is Martha initiated the whole thing. What we also don't know is whether Mary was included in this invitation at all. She might not have known. It is very possible that maybe she was outside and she came home and maybe she just wanted to rest for the evening or something like this. And then suddenly she found out instead of having a rest at home, there was Jesus. There were visitors at her own home. We don't know these details, but it is obvious that there was a difference in how these two women saw this whole meeting. Martha initiated, and I believe that's why she felt so responsible. Mary was kind of thrown into a situation that she did not initiate herself. Let's read on. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. So, Martha initiates, and here comes Mary. She simply sits down and listens to Jesus. Mary takes the opportunity she got and simply wants to spend time with Jesus. What does listening speak of? It means that there was a trust. Mary trusted Jesus. That's why she wanted to listen to him. There was a certain humility. She said, I can learn something from him. So obviously, Mary looked up to Jesus. And I believe that's a way of saying Mary had faith in Jesus. That's why she sat at his feet. If she thought, well, I already know this, I don't enjoy this man, I don't enjoy listening to him, I cannot learn anything from him, he is not important, she wouldn't have listened to him. But the fact that she was willing to listen to him and make that a priority showed that she had faith in him. She wasn't worried about tasks. She simply wanted to make the most of the opportunity. She said, Jesus is wise. Jesus loves me. He knows what is best for me. I want to listen to him, hear as much as I can from him, and learn from him. That was her highest priority. That was the opportunity that she wanted to take when she realized that Jesus was at her home. So while Mary listens, Martha is busy. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me. There's so much in this single verse. Let's take that apart. First of all, it says that Martha was distracted. Luke, the author, is already giving us a hint of what was going to happen later in the story. Martha was distracted. She didn't do the right thing. Something else, serving, distracted her from what she was supposed to do. That is being like Mary, and I'll get there in a minute what I mean by that. So, Martha was distracted. What was it that distracted her? Well, Luke says it was much serving. Remember, she initiated the whole thing. And we don't know exactly what she was thinking, but I can very well imagine. She probably thought, since I invited Jesus, I have to make everything right and everything perfect. I believe that she believed that Jesus was God. I'll get there in a minute, why I believe that. So she probably thought something like, ooh, Jesus, God himself, is coming to my home. God is perfect. So he probably wants everything to be perfect too. I invited him. So if not everything is perfect, he'll be disappointed. He'll be angry. He'll be upset. He might even leave my house. He might never talk with me again. And so she gets totally worried about herself, about her invitation, about the state of her home, about the state of the meal. And so she just gets totally overwhelmed by thinking that she has to be perfect and that everything in the house and everything about the meal has to be perfect for Jesus. So she sets a total unrealistic expectation on herself. Jesus did not expect that from her, but she thought that Jesus expects that from her. What she thought wasn't true, but that's how she felt. And then, when Mary didn't help her, then she thought, Jesus, you don't care for me? You don't care that I'm so burdened? You don't care that I'm so worried? You don't care that I have so much to do? And so she thought that the right thing for Jesus to do would be to send someone, in this case Mary, to help her. She was trying to tell Jesus what to do, which is never a good idea, because then we make ourselves God. So, let's look at the second part of the verse. Martha is saying, do you not care? That's how she felt. She thought, Jesus doesn't care for me. She felt totally alone. She felt totally isolated. Mary doesn't care how I feel because she doesn't help me. Jesus doesn't care how I feel because he doesn't tell Mary to help me. So Martha felt completely alone with her task. I always remember she put the task on herself. She initiated the meeting. She was the one who said, I'm inviting Jesus to my home. Then she set total unrealistic expectations on herself, and now she's overwhelmed because she realizes that she can't do what she wanted to do. She cannot meet her own expectations. And in that situation, now she looks for others to rescue her from the responsibility that she put on herself alone. And so she's going to Jesus and she's telling him to tell Mary to help her. Two things. I believe she has some form of faith in Jesus. You cannot invite someone to your home and then tell that person to be responsible to tell your own sister to help you. That's not how it works. I think here she acknowledges that Jesus has authority, that Jesus has some form of power over Mary. And I believe, for me personally, I believe that's why Martha did believe that Jesus is God. Because she knew that if God tells Mary to do something, then she would do it. So I believe that Martha fully believes that Jesus is who he says he is, that Jesus is God. That's why she wants to wants him to tell Mary to not listen any longer, but to get up. And then we also see that Martha was trying to tell God what to do. Now, what is that? If we are telling God what to do, we make ourselves higher than God. We put ourselves on top of God. And God now has to submit to us. In other words, we make ourselves God. That was the problem right from the Garden of Eden, the desire to be God. And we see it still being lived out in Martha thousands of years later. So you see the problem? Martha initiated the meeting. She invited Jesus. Then she sets a standard on herself that she simply cannot achieve. She thinks that Jesus thinks that everything has to be perfect. And so she lives under the pressure of this lie that came from herself. Then Martha thinks that Jesus has higher standards than he actually has. She realizes that she can't meet those standards that can only spring from her own imagination. And so as a result, she turns against Mary and tells her to help. She gets angry with her, and she turns against Jesus and tells him to tell her to help her. This woman has a real problem. But Jesus does not play the game with her. Jesus answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things." What can we learn here? Well, first of all, Jesus says her name twice. I believe that's one of the most compassionate ways of correcting another person. He's loving, he's compassionate, and he's gentle as he corrects Martha. He's saying, "Martha, Martha." He's not saying, "You idiot." He's not saying, "You're totally wrong." He's not saying, "Go away." But by calling her name, he is introducing his correction in such a loving and such a compassionate way that Martha will not feel rejected. She will not feel even worse afterwards. But she will know, Jesus loves me, and what he's telling me is actually spoken out of love, even though it's a rebuke. Then Jesus says, "You're worried and troubled about many things." Jesus describes her current state. First of all, she is worried. He's saying, worry is the fear of something negative that might happen. She thinks about the future, what might be, and she always thinks about the negative. Now, what does it say? What does the Bible say about that? The Bible says worry is sin. Because the Bible clearly says, do not worry. Now there's a difference between responsible living and worrying. Of course we need to be aware of danger, we need to be aware of the future, we need to plan and think about things so that negative things that might happen in the future will not happen. We need to take care of our future financially, we need to take care of our health in the future and all these things. That's responsible living. But worrying is something else. Worrying is thinking about the negative all the time. Living in a negative way today because out of fear of what might happen tomorrow. Not trusting in Jesus, that Jesus will take care of us tomorrow. All of that is worry. And that is sin. So, Martha is worried. Secondly, Martha is troubled. She always looks at the negative side of things. She looks at the things that other people do that are wrong. Now, I don't know about you, but I've met these kind of people. They always go around and all they are looking for is observing someone else so that they can say, look the negative thing, look the wrong things that this person has done. They walk up and down the street, they read the newspapers, they look on the internet, and all they are looking for is finding someone or finding something to then point the finger and say, look at the bad thing that this person has done. They are troubled. They mainly see worldly realities. And yes, no doubt, this world is dark. There's a lot of really dark, really bad stuff happening in this world. But if we focus on that, and only on that, we become troubled. And then it says, she's troubled about many things. She looks at everything around her that isn't perfect. Every time she sees something that isn't right, she gets troubled. She's looking at this world. She's looking at the worldly realities. She's looking at how dark everything is. She knows how things are supposed to be. And so she's troubled about many things. She feels responsible for many things. And she wants to fix the things around her, but then she can't. And so she's caught in this negative cycle. Or she's helpless because she realizes that she cannot fix the things around her that she wants to fix. That's how Jesus describes her. Not a pretty description, huh? She is in real trouble. But thankfully, Jesus doesn't stop with the problem. He gives her the solution as well. But one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her. In other words, he's saying to Martha, look at your sister. Look at Mary. Look at what she is doing. And I invite you to do the same. What was he saying? Well, instead of looking at the problems around her, and the people who don't do what they're supposed to do, and the problems and the worries and the anxieties and the stress that she feels and all these things, instead of looking at all of that, what she should do instead is simply listen to Jesus. Why should she do that? Well, for her as well as for us today, we can get so caught up in the trouble of this world and in the anxieties of this world. But when she looks at Jesus, when we look at Jesus, when we get to know Jesus, then we will realize a few things. And something will shift inside of us. When we look at Jesus, we realize, I'm sinful. I need forgiveness. Yes, these people do something wrong. And yes, this is not the way it's supposed to be. But I mess up too. And I need forgiveness. And so I cannot look down on others because they do something wrong. I do wrong things too. And then we are able to forgive. We realize worrying, being troubled, all these things, they won't solve anything. Being worried only hurts me. And it has never and never will change a situation. It will never change anyone or solve anything. Worrying, being troubled, only hurts me. We will realize Jesus has answers to the problems we are facing. And when we live in a relationship with Him, we are able to say, you know, Jesus needs to solve this. I can't. Jesus gives hope and a future. When we live in this dark world, but we get to know Jesus, then we realize someday everything will be fine. Someday Jesus will restore all things. Someday heaven will come. And then we are able to say, you know, these worries that I'm facing right now, they don't matter. Because Jesus has such bright hope for me. Jesus strengthens us. He gives us something to overcome these worries. He gives us something better. He gives us joy. He gives us peace. And suddenly, everything inside of us changes. Now, Jesus is not saying to Martha, well, ignore those things you're concerned about. But He is saying, bring them to me. And if you bring them to me, then I will deal with these problems together with you. So Jesus is very gentle in His answer, but He's also saying a few very direct things. For one, He's saying, Martha, you're criticizing your sister. but she's doing right. You're the one who needs to change. He's also saying, I'm not going to tell her to not listen to me any longer just because you have put a burden on yourself that you cannot carry. I'm not going to send her out of my presence just because you want her to. And you now have a choice. You can now choose to continue living the way you do, and then you will get more and more troubled, you get more and more worried, you can get more and more exhausted. In other words, in this particular situation, you can go back to the kitchen and there be angry and try to get the house clean and get a perfect meal and all these things. You can do that. Or you can drop all that stuff and you can say, okay, Mary, I'll do what you do. I'll sit down. I'll listen to Jesus as well. Now the story ends there, but we don't know what Martha decided to do. But these are basically the two options she had. Either learn from her sister and sit down and listen to Jesus, or go back to the kitchen and get more and more angry and feel more and more alone. So what's the difference between these two? Martha looked at the world first. She saw problems. Like, okay, the house isn't clean, or the meal isn't perfect, or something like this. She saw so many things that needed to be done, and then she immediately expected Jesus and others to fix every single problem that she saw. Mary instead looked at Jesus first, because she knew, I can't fix problems. I don't have it in me. I don't have the authority, I don't have the power, I don't have anything to change situations. So all I can do is, I want to sit at Jesus' feet. I want to listen to him. And then we can think about fixing the problems together. Now that doesn't mean that Mary never worked, but I believe that her work was an overflow of her relationship with Jesus. We don't read about it in this story, but I'm absolutely sure that if Mary was sitting at Jesus' feet and Jesus told her, Mary, can you please make something to eat for me? She would have done it. If Jesus said, can you please go to the next village and get something for me from there? I'm absolutely sure she would have done it. But the difference is, Martha worked what she thought Jesus wanted her to do. And it was wrong, because it all came out of her own imagination, out of her own thinking. Mary, on the other hand, she worked with Jesus. She sat in his presence, and she simply did only the things that Jesus asked her to do. She didn't go on pursuing the things that she thought Jesus wanted her to do, but she waited to hear from him first before she actually did it. Now, what kind of relationship do you think the two of them had? What do you think happened in the house? They obviously lived together, Mary and Martha. What do you think happened on a daily basis between the two? Well, the Bible doesn't say, but I'm pretty sure they did not get along very well with each other. What did Martha say about Mary, or think about Mary? She probably thought, my sister is so lazy. My sister doesn't get anything done. She listens to Jesus instead of doing something about the problems out there, and listening doesn't get any problems solved. So she's absolutely lazy, she doesn't get anything done, and she's wasting her time just listening instead of doing. So I'm pretty sure Martha considered Mary as a lazy person. Now what do you think Mary said or thought about Martha? She probably thought, stop bugging me. I know that I cannot fix this world. I know that I cannot fix the problems that you have. My life is not about solving problems. My life is not about work. My life is about a relationship with Jesus. So I want to go after that relationship. I want to love Jesus. I want to listen to him. I want to hear from him. I want to follow him. I want to do what he says. And I will not let you distract me from that. I will not allow you to stand between me and my Jesus, because he is the most important person in my life. And in this particular situation, she probably thought, you invited him. You brought him here. I wanted to rest this afternoon. I wanted to have a free afternoon. And then you invited him and you brought him to my house. So if that's what you wanted to do, and now you are so burdened with all the work, then you deal with it. But I am not going to allow you to mess with my life. And I'm not going to allow you to stand between Jesus and me. I'm pretty sure these two sisters had quite some problems with each other because of their different priorities. So far the story. But what on earth does that have to do with us? How can we apply the principles from this story to our lives? Well, here are some. Jesus puts more importance on being in fellowship with him than getting stuff done. Jesus clearly states what Mary did is better than what Martha did in this situation. Our priority is not to serve Jesus. Our priority is to be in fellowship with Jesus, to be in a good relationship with Jesus. What does that mean? It means that our priority is reading the Bible, knowing the Bible. It means that our priority is to pray, to speak with Jesus, and to listen to him. It means that our priority is to live in the Christian community so we can grow in our faith together. We can allow other Christians to speak into our lives, and we can allow God to speak to us through other Christians. That's more important. That's most important. And then serving the church, doing something for the church, is second priority. Only when we do the listening part can we do the serving part as well. To take it one step further, Jesus never told us to work for him. Now, how do things work in the world? We're working for a boss. We're working for a company. We're getting an assignment, and the company just tells us, you have 2 weeks' time, now do it. And then we use our own strength, we use our own wisdom, we use what we have to get the job done for someone else who simply tells us what to do. That's how the world works, but that's not who Jesus is. He is not our boss. We cannot work for him. We can only work with him. Jesus only can enable us to do the work that he wants us to do. Remember what Jesus said about himself? Jesus, the Son of God, creator of the universe, has all authority. He said that also in other passages. All authority is on me. I can do whatever I want. But then he also says, I can do nothing by myself. I can only do what I see my Father do, and then I do it with him. We cannot impress Jesus with our work and say, look what I have done for you. We cannot earn favor with Jesus by exceeding his expectations and say, I have done more than you asked me to. Look what a great servant I am. We cannot achieve anything. All resources we have are given by God. If it wasn't for God's grace, we would be dead in a second. Who gives us our intelligence? Who gives us life? Who gives us wisdom? Who gives us our job? It's all God. The Bible says His mercies are new every morning. He is the one giving us every single breath. And if He chooses to not give us breath any longer, we would be dead a second from now. All resources we have are given by God anyways. So how can we claim that we can do something for God if everything we have is from Him anyways? Let me just use this analogy. Imagine a mother is giving a 5-year-old boy, 5-year-old son, €5 and says, do whatever you want to do with them. And so the son goes out, goes to a shop, buys a bunch of flowers, and then he goes back to the mother and he says, look, I have worked so hard. I have earned money, and now with this money I have bought you these flowers. Now the mom might appreciate the gesture, but I can guarantee you there's one thing she's not going to like, and that is his boasting about the money. Because she will know in her heart, I've given you the money. And if I didn't give you the money, then you would have no money to buy these flowers. And so she might appreciate the gesture, but in her heart she will know, he got it wrong. It wasn't his money. I gave it to him, and I enabled him to give these flowers back to me. But let's turn the same story around. Again, mommy gives child €5, and child buys the flowers and comes back to the mother. But this time the child says, you know, Mom, I love you. You have given me €5. You asked me I can do anything I want with these €5. But I wanted to give them back to you. I know you like flowers. I know you love flowers. And so that's why I use the money you have given me so that I can bring a smile on your face. I know you love me. You take good care of me. I feel safe with you. You're a wonderful mom. And I want to have a good relationship with you. And so I'm using these €5 to invest in our relationship. And here are your flowers. Don't you think that the mom in this case has a total different response? That she thinks very, very differently about why the son bought her these flowers? The first one, used the money to boast. He claimed it for himself, and then he tried to boast to his mother about the money. But there was nothing for him to boast about. The second one fully acknowledged that the money was from his mother, and so he used it to invest in the relationship itself. Now that's the difference between Mary and Martha. Martha didn't realize that everything she had was from Jesus himself. And so she tried to work in her own strength. She thought that the only strength she has is from within herself. Like the boy thought that his €5 were his own. And so that's why Martha got totally exhausted, because she realized, I don't have enough strength. I cannot do this. Whereas Mary was the one who said, I don't have any strength. All I have is from Jesus. And so I want to use my life, I want to use my time, I want to use my strength to invest in my relationship with Jesus. Like the second boy who used his €5 to invest in his relationship with the mother. These two kids did the same thing, but they did it with total different heart attitudes. And in the same way, Martha tried to work for Jesus, but Mary realized, I cannot work for Jesus. I can only work with Jesus, with the things that He has given me. So serving God is an overflow of a love relationship. when we love Jesus, when we live in a love relationship with him, we will receive his love, we will receive hope for the future, we will receive peace, we will receive joy, and we will also listen to what it is that he wants us to do and what it is that he does not want us to do. And as a result, we will work in a close relationship with him. Serving God doesn't make us right with God. We cannot work for him. But that's what Martha tried to do, and see where it got her. She tried to please Jesus with her work, but all she got in response was a rebuke, a correction. Jesus saying, "You're doing the wrong thing." A few more indirect takeaways from what we talked about. When we are exhausted, when we feel tired, when we feel like nobody is helping me, when we have these kind of feelings, I generally, when I'm in that kind of season in my life, I use it as a reason to go back to Jesus and asking him, "Jesus, am I doing something that you didn't call me to do?" Martha focused on so many problems and on her own expectation that she lost her connection with Jesus. And feeling tired, feeling exhausted, feeling like nobody is helping me, it could be a sign that maybe we are not connected to Jesus that well. And so in that kind of season, I always try to go back to him and ask him, "God, is there something I'm doing that you didn't call me to do? Am I doing things out of my own strength? Am I in a right relationship with you? What's wrong? Is it me? Am I doing something wrong?" And then receiving either correction from him, or maybe new strength, or a new attitude, or something from him that keeps me going. Exhaustion, feeling tired, feeling like nobody is helping me, should be a sign to draw closer to Jesus and not further away from him. Another takeaway: don't listen to Christians who tell you to lighten their burden. Remember, Martha told Mary, "Jesus, tell her to help me." And Jesus said, "I'm not going to do that." Just because someone in the church is asking for help doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because someone is exhausted doesn't mean you have to help. That's the situation Mary and Martha were in. If someone in the church is exhausted, maybe you're the right person to help, maybe you're not. I can't tell you. If someone in the church needs help, maybe you're the person to help, maybe you're not. So just because someone is exhausted doesn't mean you immediately need to act. You can simply go back to Jesus and ask him, "Jesus, do you want me to get involved in this?" And if he says yes, then do it. But if he doesn't say yes, then it's all right to say, "I don't feel called to doing this. I don't feel that Jesus wants me to do this, so I'm not going to do it." Next takeaway: do not let serving distract you from your relationship with God. Serving is a good thing. Helping other people is a good thing. Being there for others is a wonderful thing. But once it distracts us from our relationship with God, it has become an idol. If we're so busy doing things with God or for God or whatever is going on in our heads, and we don't have our quiet time, we don't have time to pray, we don't really feel connected with God, then it's very likely that we got our priorities wrong. It's very likely that Martha has crept in our hearts, and we have to take a step back and get our priorities right again and reconnect with God. Next takeaway: be careful about unspoken expectations. Remember, Martha invited Jesus, and it's very likely or very possible that she didn't even ask Mary whether it's okay with her and whether she wanted to invite Jesus as well. But then later, Martha expected Mary to help her out, even though Mary was probably not part of the decision-making progress of inviting Jesus. Now, sometimes Christians today do exactly the same. We kind of go ahead, especially in the church, we kind of go ahead with a plan. We have a new ministry, we have a new project, and we're like, okay, I'll do this, and I'll lead the way. And then we kind of have this unspoken expectation. Once I keep going, once I start this whole thing, I want everyone in the church to follow me. But we never ask them, and we never get consensus. And so we expect that people follow us who never had a say in whether they want to do this in the first place. Do not let, especially in the church, do not let leaders push unspoken expectations on you. That's why our meeting that we had last week about the new location was so important to us. Because we didn't want to make this mistake that Martha did. We didn't want to be the ones who say like, okay, we are moving to a new location, and these are the consequences, and then everybody says, I don't like it. I didn't want to do this. I didn't know that this was going to change. I didn't know that we were going to do that once we move. And then suddenly there are these unspoken expectations from the leadership, and the whole congregation is complaining about something that we have decided. And that's exactly why we had this meeting last week, and why we presented you as much as we could at this point in time and saying, if we move, these are the things that are going to happen. And we all agreed on it, and now it's a decision that we made together, and nobody can say afterwards, you didn't tell me, that was an unspoken expectation. We didn't want to be like Martha. We wanted to get you on board before making a decision, and not simply decide for you. So in summary, never try to work for Jesus. You cannot work for Jesus. We have nothing within us to work for him. All we can do is working with him. All we can do is listening to Jesus, asking him what he wants us to do, and then knowing that the things that he wants us to do, he will give us the strength and the patience and the wisdom to complete them. And then we can have the fulfilled life that he promised us. Now here's the problem. Let's face it. All of us have Martha in us, don't we? We can do all the right things for all the wrong motives. But that is worthless in God's eyes. How often do we make promises to God? We tell him, I read my Bible every day. I'll pray for this person every day until he or she gets saved. And 3 days later, we already fail. We tell Jesus things like, I'm going to fix myself. I will never commit this sin again. And then we try in our own strength. And 2 days later, we do it again. Even though we promised God 1,000 times we won't do it again. We try to impress Jesus by serving in the church, giving to the church, giving money, and then thinking to ourselves like, oh, I'm such a great Christian. Look at all the things that I have done. But that's the Martha spirit. We're trying to work for God in our own strength. Now let me let you in on a secret. God is not impressed by that at all. Isaiah 64, but we are all as an unclean thing, and all our righteousness are as filthy rags, and we all do fade as a leaf, and our iniquities like the wind have taken us away. Anything we do in our own strength is at best like filthy rags compared to God's holiness. Let's stop working for God. Let's focus on our relationship with God first. And let's let our work be an overflow of our relationship with him. That's where Martha failed. And that's where Mary got it right. Now to close the sermon, I'm not going to ask you the question, am I Mary or am I Martha? I think that's the wrong question. I think the right question is, where is Martha in my life? Am I doing my work in my own strength? Am I serving in the church in my own strength? Am I trying to impress Jesus with what I'm doing? Am I reading my Bible with the right motives? Or do I just kind of, in my own strength, try to fulfill a plan? All these questions. Where is Martha in my life? What area of my life am I behaving like Martha? Trying to please Jesus with what I'm doing instead of living in a relationship with Him. Let's identify such an area. And then we can put ourselves in Martha's shoes. And imagine that we see someone else who gets it right, who sits at Jesus' feet. And we get jealous. And we think like, why do they have it so easy? It's so hard for me and they have it so easy. And then out of that jealousy we complain. And we say, Jesus, this is wrong. Tell them to work like I am working. And then Jesus is calling out our name. And He's saying to me, Bernd, you're worried and troubled about many things. But one thing is needed. And Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her. And then we have exactly the same choice that Martha had. We can go back to our own way. We can get more tired, more exhausted, more angry, more frustrated, feel more isolated, more alone, and just try harder and harder until we break down. Or we can simply sit down, simply listen to Jesus, and simply say, Jesus, I've tried my own way. Didn't work. I got exhausted. I got tired. I got worn out. I didn't feel loved. I felt abandoned. I want to try a new way. I want to try it your way. I want to listen to you. I want to hear what you have to say about this situation. And then I'm going to do it your way from now on, instead of my own way. Martha had these two choices. So do you today. May we pray. Father, thank you that you have a wonderful plan for us. Thank you that your way are not the world's way. Thank you that you long for a relationship with us above anything else. Thank you that we don't have to please you with our works. Thank you that we don't have to run and chase you and try to impress you, because, Lord, if that was your way, then we could never do it. But, Lord, what we can do is listen to you, receive strength, receive peace, receive joy, receive comfort from you. And then we can use whatever you have given us to bring glory to your name. So, Father, thank you that you have such a wonderful way for us that is so different from what we are used to in this world. And so, Lord, we ask you that today you will help us to identify the areas where we are Martha, to not follow those ways any longer, but instead to surrender to you and to trust you that your way is better. Lord, without you we are nothing. Jesus, you yourself said that you cannot do anything without the Father. And today is the day when we say the same. And we simply acknowledge, Lord, everything I have is yours. So help me to surrender. Help me to walk with you. Help me to trust your way. I give you my self-righteousness. I give you everything I have. I acknowledge that everything I have is yours. And from this day I want to live differently. and I want to live with what you have given me and do what you want me to do and nothing else. So Father, we praise you. Thank you for your wonderful plan for our lives. We love you, we trust in you, and we worship you. In Jesus' name, amen.